All right, we will kick things off here. Thank you everyone for joining us. We are proud to present the third installment of Edrans TechTalks. Today we will be discussing the well-architected framework, diving into the cost optimization pillar of that framework, and giving an overview on FinOps and how companies can leverage its practices to get some quick cost savings and start building out cloud finance strategies for the future. A quick couple housekeeping items. The Tech Talk, you all will be in listen only mode, and you'll be able to ask questions via your control panel. We will try to get to all those questions at the end of this, and we'll try to make this around 30 minutes of discussion and questions. So my name is Joe Henderson. I'm the GM of Edrans. We are a premier AWS consultancy, and I am joined today by JR Storment, who's founder of Cloudability, which was acquired by Apptio last year, and current president of the FinOps Foundation. The format and agenda today, we're going to give an overview on Edrans, who we are. We're going to dive into the well-architected framework, specifically around cost optimization, that pillar. JR is going to give a FinOps overview of what he's seen in the past and where he sees cloud cost optimization going in the future, and then give you all some cost savings tactics that you can apply today. And then, as we discussed at the end, we'll have a Q&A for some questions. So, Edrans, we are a premier AWS consultancy. We've been doing cloud services for the past 10 years, and we have offices in Portland, Oregon, Buenos Aires, Argentina, and Barcelona, Spain. We deliver services like cloud migrations, managed services, well-architected reviews, and software development. We also run these short assessment services focused around cloud security and cost optimization. So over the past couple of years, we became a part of the AWS well-architected program. So as a quick refresher for some of you, AWS has created this framework to define what a cloud infrastructure is based on 5 pillars of operational excellence, security, reliability, performance efficiency, and cost optimization. And so we've been delivering these well-architected reviews and assessments all over the world for the past couple of years. And what we've learned when we engage with our customers is that they are typically focused on one of these pillars as a theme or problem or project that we're helping them with. And what we've learned, we make sure the customer understands, is that all 5 pillars of the framework are dependent on each other. So when doing focused work within one of these pillars, it can affect the health of the other pillars. So now, with the unfortunate circumstances happening around the world, cost optimization is definitely the pillar that is the hot topic. So in a recent article this month by the big VC Andreessen Horowitz, written as a letter to their portfolio companies, they talk about how companies need to focus on efficiency before growth in this volatile market. They even call out cutting AWS costs specifically as a way to create some more runway for the companies. One of the more interesting parts was them citing some historical data from 2008, is that companies that not only adopted quick, more efficient practices during this crisis, but also maintained it over time, these were the companies that were better equipped to succeed once the market started to get better. So in summary, we feel that companies need to take a look at this event. They're looking at cost optimization as not a one-time thing, but they need to start to build out a practice for the future. So this is where FinOps comes in. So I'll kick it over to JR. He's going to talk about what he's seen over the past couple of years from founding a cloud cost optimization company 9 years ago to establishing the FinOps Foundation.
Hey, thanks, Joe. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all staying sane and healthy during this time. As everyone has been dealing with, I will call it initially that I hope I don't have a kid or dog sounds in the background, but apologies if I do, as we're all working from home these days. So, you know, I've been in this space of cloud and specifically the costs around cloud for the last 10 years and have really seen it evolve a bit over time. You know, early on, everyone was just really focused on, you know, circa 2011, 12, the early folks in cloud, just on, you know, understanding what they were spending. And then over time, you know, got to this idea of optimization and then further and further into a larger practice that we're going to talk about today of cloud financial management. You know, I would say that, you know, everything we're going to talk about is really grounded in stories we've seen over the years from, you know, everybody from small startups, and I've worked with, you know, hundreds of different organizations up to the big Fortune 500 folks here in the US, or the FTSE folks in the UK, where it was for a couple of years, or those in Australia as well, like Atlassian, Qantas, and others who've been a part of this process. But what's interesting across all of them is that they all sort of face similar challenges with cloud. Not to contradict Joe and most of the market, but one of the things that I want to call out straight away is that we don't really see this space as just cost optimization, and it's really about cost accountability and cost visibility and a new way of practicing cloud financial management. And AWS, bless their hearts, baked cost optimization into the pillar of the 5 well-architected framework. But if you look more closely at the more recent messaging, they're referring to this larger space as cloud financial management, because it's not just about optimization savings, it's a new way of operating. So that's what we're going to talk about today. That being said, as Joe mentioned, a lot of what people are focused on in the last month or two is the optimization component of that. So we will dig into that a bit as well. So let me click ahead here. Hopefully this will work. Oops, Joe, looks like it's not letting me click forward. Do I have control?
Yep, you should have control now.
1 second, folks. Apologies. Do you mind advancing for it? Okay, awesome. So we pulled some headlines from some other presentations we had seen around how the current climate is impacting cloud adoption. And what I wanted to highlight here, oops, you can go back one. What I wanted to highlight here is this aspect that cloud is actually in a lot of ways accelerating what we're seeing within adoption, COVID is accelerating what we're seeing in adoption of cloud. The companies I've spoken with in the last month or two during this time, who are already well into their cloud journey, are actually accelerating it in a lot of cases so they can go ahead and shut down more of the data center. Conversely, those who are just starting to dip their toes in are actually looking at kind of pausing things as, there's so many changes afoot. But what I think is really notable, we've seen anecdotally and also in this first quote here, is that demand for the cloud services is really soaring. One thing to call out with cloud that for those of you who are maybe earlier on the cloud migration journey is that often people think about cloud as a way to do cost savings, but really those who are, have had the most success and are further along tend to look at cloud as an enabler of technology, an enabler of innovation. One of my favorite quotes is Alaska Airlines, their CIO a couple years back said that they are actually a software company with wings rather than an airline, because they know that they need to use cloud and technology to deliver the best experiences, the best innovations, the best products to their customers. So let's look at the core problem that cloud creates though. And Joe, if you can click to the next slide for me. Which is this: when we've combined this world of fast iterative development cycles in a DevOps and Agile world with cloud, which is very self-service, we see a real breaking of the traditional procurement model that has existed in organizations around IT procurement. What we've got now essentially is a set of engineers, and in large organizations, this could be thousands of individuals who have access to the cloud consoles or writing infrastructure as code to deploy infrastructure. And they essentially can spend whatever money they want. They like to think of it as having a credit card with no limit, and they never really see the bill. So there's not a really good feedback loop of accountability that happens. Now you could call this a bad thing, and particularly if you're in maybe a finance procurement role, you likely would. But if you're in an innovation role, an engineering role, a technology role, a product role, this is actually great, right? Because you get very fast access to the resources that you need, and you can do more iterative innovation cycles. So historically, this is how it was structured, right? You had the tech teams and the finance teams in separate sort of camps. The engineers needed resources, or the ops teams, or whoever was deploying the resources or needed those. They would request those. Finance, procurement would act as approvers. They'd go out and buy what they need, long cycles. The good news here is spend was predictable and static, right? But you had long procurement cycles, and you really couldn't innovate and test things. Failure was very expensive. What we see increasingly now as people go to cloud, right, you've got these tech teams who have all the power and all the access, and the finance procurement teams and business teams have limited visibility. Now, spend is dynamic. Again, that could be good or bad, less predictable, but what you've got now is an ability to do agile experimentation, innovation. But these teams, and I'd actually add a third one to this, the tech, the finance, and the business, struggle to coordinate, interact, and communicate because this is a new model of working together that traditionally they haven't had. So I'm sure you've all sort of seen, these themes exist, but some of the new realities that organizations face. The things to highlight here, first of all, is decentralization, right? So in the scaled cloud companies that I've worked with over the years, 8 years ago, 50,000 a month was a giant spender. Today, talk to companies spending 500 million a year in a single cloud provider. In all of them, though, we've seen these buying centers pushed out. So large cloud consumers may have thousands of different individual teams or cost centers who are deploying resources, adoption scaling really quickly, it's hitting really material levels. And the spending being variable is an interesting point because a lot of people talk about the shift from CapEx to OpEx and what that does from an accounting standpoint. What I think is more interesting here is the shift from fixed spend to variable spend, which is actually a behavioral change, right, for engineering and tech teams who now have to consider cost as a component of their work. As a CTO that I talked to a couple of years ago in Barcelona he said, now engineers, in order to be good citizens, have to think about cost efficiency. That's now part of their job. And no webinar would be complete with a Gartner stat. They came out with this recently, saying that 80% of organizations will overshoot their infrastructure as a service budget. I'd actually go a step further with this after talking to hundreds of these organizations over the years, which is most of the organizations don't even have good budgets in place for cloud. And if they do, they struggle to push those out to the teams to really drive accountability around those budgets. So this is where FinOps comes in, and you can call FinOps by whatever name you want. This is a short version, could be cloud financial management, right? If you want to use what AWS is using, I think in a lot of their vernacular now. But the idea is, how do we bring financial accountability to this cloud spend? The model of FinOps in real-time cloud financial management is about a prescriptive set of actions, best practices, and culture that are there to pull together these different distributed teams, right? The product teams, finance, business, all these folks that are not used to working well together because they don't have a set of communication skills, they don't have a common lexicon, they don't have a set of common best practices in this world, so that, to the third point, they can start to make business decisions together to drive more business value. Really important to note that third point does not say, let's do FinOps or let's do cloud financial management in order to spend less. In a lot of organizations, there are certain workloads, platforms, et cetera, where you want to spend more. Was working with a tech unicorn about a year ago who was very much cutting costs in their staging and development environments, but were doubling down on spending more and more on resources in their data and personalization products because they knew that drove more revenue. So the idea is, how do we get all these teams working together to make the right business decisions? And sometimes, as a lot of companies are doing right now, it is about cutting costs. So as we've talked about, it's not just optimization, but what we're going to cover a bit today, and what I encourage you all to look at as you may be looking at optimization right now, is how do I build a broader cloud financial management muscle? There is a set of things that you need to set up in your organization around how do we communicate, how do we set processes in place, et cetera, that will help you do this. FinOps typically involves a number of pieces as you get going. So first of all, we want to encourage collaboration between teams. This needs to be sort of a top-down mandate. This isn't going to happen, and there's a set of processes put in place to enable this. We also want to put goals and KPIs in place for these teams. Some of those may be around cost savings. Some of them may be around visibility into cloud spends. Really common one also is tagging coverage or the ability to allocate spend. Another one might be around the number of teams who have access to the data, et cetera. One of the things we found to that third circle on the right, though, is we've done polls and surveys within the FinOps Foundation, which is a community of practitioners of cloud financial management, is that the top concern typically is not about optimization or chargeback or allocation. It's actually about education. How do we get teams up-leveled, skills up-leveled, so that they can actually be more efficient as needed? Next area is obviously reporting. If you've looked at AWS's cost and usage reports, if you've looked at Google's BigQuery exports, the data coming out of the cloud providers is massive, right? You're looking at second level resolution, often on tens of thousands, or in some cases, millions of resources. So it's critical to get reporting out to the individual teams, to that principle number 3, so they can take ownership, and to principle number 4, make that timely and accessible. The idea is you want to create a feedback loop for your teams. You want them to be able to see, when I take an action today, tomorrow I see, or even the same day, I see an impact on the cloud spend. So you create that loop to say, right now we want to lean heavily into savings, and over here maybe we want to lean heavily into performance or security. And this is where this fits in, right, to the larger pillar of the well-architected framework. Automation is also key in this world. Typically, companies take a sort of crawl, walk, run approach to deploying FinOps or cloud financial management best practices. Automation gets into that walk or run level, where initially a team is going to be looking at their recommendations, their reporting, whether it be the central team driving best practices or the end user teams actually taking accountability. But ultimately, you want to have a certain number of functions happen automatically. In the FinOps Foundation, we have a call coming up in May where we're going to be focused on Cloud Custodian, which is a great tool, open source tool for driving a lot of these automation pieces. Whether you use that to build your own or use something to drive it, you definitely want to get to that place. And the last bit, obviously, is cost and use optimization. So over the years of working with practitioners at scale in this space, we've seen some really common trends emerge. Out of the FinOps Foundation conversations with practitioners came this FinOps lifecycle, which not everyone's going to follow the exact same pattern and the same speed, but there tend to be 3 large groupings and distinct phases that companies go through. So the first one is what we call the inform phase. This basically encompasses, really visibility and allocation. The first step before you can start to optimize is to understand where spending is going, to understand who's responsible for it, to give visibility to those teams. That first phase of inform is actually, in my opinion, the most complicated. It's the hardest to get right. It takes the most time. And if you're a large organization with hundreds or thousands of production workloads or dev environments, this can be a phase that literally takes a year, 2 years to really nail. Once you understand, at least at a high level, because remember, we want to take a crawl, walk, run approach, do an initial pass, and ideally move quickly through this and iterate. Notice it's a loop, not a linear path. But once you get that first pass of visibility in, you then want to move into that optimize phase. And the optimize phase is where you're going to start to set goals for what you want to accomplish, changes you want to make in your infrastructure. Optimization may be, again, shutting things down, saving money. Optimization may be actually turning up to larger resources, more auto-scaling for those that need to scale more quickly and deliver better experiences. Optimization may be slowing down in certain areas where you have security concerns. Whatever they are, in that phase, you're going to start to analyze the infrastructure, set those goals, and determine what you want to do. In the third phase, the operate phase, is really where we start to take actions, right? We're going to take the goals that we've set in the optimize phase. We're going to look at the visibility we have in the inform phase and start to, if you're early on in the crawl phase or crawl process of this, you're going to go shut things down, right? You're going to turn off resources aren't being used, or you might start to automate that with, either open source tools or automation of any type. And then over time, you're going to start to integrate your cloud spending into your larger business value, right? So looking at marrying up your spend alongside your revenue metrics or your spend alongside other internal metrics that matter. Over time, if you follow this process, you really get a flywheel effect, right? Where you're starting to get momentum and you're accelerating the maturity of your cloud financial management practice. Really important to note also, this life cycle does not apply across an entire company. If you have multiple teams, if you have multiple workloads, multiple organizations, they're likely at different stages of maturity, and they're likely at different stages of this. So the idea of this centralized FinOps team is to really help drive the best practice in these areas so that everybody can mature at their own pace based on their own cloud maturity. Really, I'd say the most important principle of all this is you want to push accountability out to the edge. You want to empower the feature teams, the product teams, the ops teams, however your organization is structured, to manage their own usage of cloud against their budget. So first step in this, if you think about the two things that make up your cloud bill, you have in any cloud provider, GCP, AWS, Azure, you have how much you use, right? The usage amount, whether it be instances or gigabytes of storage or serverless functions, whatever that count is. And then you have the second part, which is how much you pay for those, right? The rate per hour, per second, per function, whatever it is. And those two together make up your bill. This is about the first part of that. Let's enable those teams to manage their usage. So because the teams know what they are using and they know their resources, they know the needs, so they can optimize that. The second part of that, the how much we're paying for those, is still in the most advanced companies we've seen a centralized function. This is where that central FinOps team can look across the entire cloud estate to determine how do we get the best possible rates for our organization. If you're in AWS, right, through things like savings plans or reserved instances, Azure reserved instances, Google committed use discounts, whatever the right place is, this team can look across everything and make sure you're paying the least possible for what your distributed teams are actually using. The centralized FinOps team is also going to be responsible for driving best practices through the organization, pushing out that reporting, helping to educate teams, making sure goals and KPIs are consistent, working under that executive sponsorship to make sure training and enablement happens across the organization. Again, a lot of teams in large organizations, particularly enterprises, are having to really transition from a model of fixed spend, CapEx spend, capacity planning, and take those same teams and move them into this world. So there's a giant amount of need around how do we educate, skills, uplift those teams. You want a central group really driving that over time. Now, this FinOps team, and this comes up often, about where does it sit? What is it? Who's on it? We've had some great calls and discussions in the FinOps Foundation, and some of this is available on the blog or in the members area there, but around where does it sit? And often this is either a portion of or next to the Cloud Center of Excellence, right? The Cloud Center of Excellence is going to be looking at the entire set of the AWS Well Architected framework, security, they're going to be looking at performance, they're going to look at all these areas. For the cost portion, you're going to want a dedicated team there. Typically is made up of an analyst, potentially somebody who has some automation expertise on the engineering side, a few folks. When you start, it's one person. The larger spenders who are part of the FinOps Foundation have upwards of sometimes 9 to 10 because they're spending hundreds of millions a year, and there's a real case to make that there. But the idea is it's a group that really can talk both tech and finance and can bridge the gap for best practices and conversations between those various groups. And when this team is successful, they are really breaking down silos. In the FinOps book that we published earlier this year with O'Reilly, there's a chapter on what we call the language of FinOps. And my co-author in the book, Mike Fuller from Atlassian, has really pioneered a lot of work in this space. But what he talks about in there is this idea that we really need to provide a common lexicon through understanding what we mean when we talk about a cost metric and what reports people are looking at and what we're pushing out consistently, so that you can get these tech teams and these finance teams coming together to act as one. Mike has often said, and we've talked about this together publicly, that his job is success as leading FinOps at Atlassian is when the tech teams and the finance teams can come together, have this conversation without him, without the FinOps folks in the room. We want to use FinOps and cloud financial management best practices to empower those teams to be self-sufficient, to work together. And in this model, what you get then is the ability to move more quickly, right? The ability to experiment, to deliver better features, better functionality, better data to your customers with a low cost of failure. This is what success looks like. And over time, as companies grow in this, they end up in a place where they stop thinking about cost just as the primary metric and start aligning it with unit economics, right? It isn't necessarily success to spend less in cloud because you may be moving more workloads or your business may be growing. We want to start thinking about this through the terms of what does it cost us per customer or dollar of revenue or some meaningful metric that we can align across the whole business from the C-suite all the way down to the engineer. So we touched briefly on how to structure your team for success and what that looks like. Before we get into some of the optimization quick wins that I know everybody's interested in, wanted to touch on this briefly, which is as you're building out your cloud financial management best practice, first key thing is you really need executive sponsorship. You want to have your CFO and your CTO or CIO, whoever's responsible for the technology, coming together to both be pushing this internally. It's critical to get everybody on board. As you build out the team, it need to be a cross-functional team that includes finance, tech, and the business, again, often aligned to the Cloud Center of Excellence to drive those best practices. And before you start optimizing, before you start making changes to your infrastructure, you want to focus on foundational capabilities. Often that is, as we said, starting with Inform, right? Getting your allocation models in place, bringing these teams together to understand what are the shared goals, the shared KPIs that we want to hit on so that we can be efficient over time. We want to define a regular cadence of communication between these teams and again, hit that common lexicon, as we call the language of FinOps. And you need to get very clear about who's responsible for what. For those of you who are familiar with the RACI model, the responsible, accountable, consultant, informed. I love that model, but it's anything you want to use. It says, each team owns this team owns this, who's responsible, et cetera. So classic example, rolled up is that the business units, the in teams, are responsible for managing capacity or usage, whereas the centralized FinOps group, Cloud Financial team in the Cloud Center of Excellence is responsible for reporting, visibility, automation, et cetera. It's going to be a little different for everybody. There's been some great conversations in the FinOps Foundation about how people have structured it, but the idea is get very clear about ownership and going back to that first bullet, make sure you've got executive sponsorship to push this through the organization. All right, so as we're getting to the end here, did want to hit on a couple cost-cutting techniques, as I think everybody's mind is there. Not to beat a dead horse, but before you do that, first focus on your allocation. You really can't optimize what you can't allocate. What that means is, you want to go shut something down, you need to understand who's responsible for it, what it's doing, tagging practices, et cetera, linked account strategy in AWS, subscriptions in Azure, labels in GCP, whatever you're using, you need to nail this so that you can then quickly move into optimization. It's hard to make drastic sudden changes in cost if you haven't spent time working in this area. So to help make that happen, you really want to hunt down untagged resources and automate a lot of those things. I call out Cloud Custodian here, the open source tool, because as I mentioned, we're doing a session on this in the FinOps Foundation in a couple of weeks. It's a great way to automatically shut those things down or identify where there are gaps. So first thing to do when people ask about how do we save money is look for unused resources. Now this may sound really obvious, but I want to highlight, I'm not talking about right sizing, which is often a hot topic. We're not talking about sizing down a resource that's over provisioned or making changes to infrastructure that's being used. That can take time. Right sizing requires going to teams and understanding what's happening. You want to first just look for things that really have zero or almost no utilization. Shut those down. That could be instances, it could be storage is not being used, unused IPs, whatever the area is, lowest hanging fruit. Next typical path is to consider other storage classes for things that are less frequently accessed. This is nice because, again, you don't have to be deleting things or removing things. AWS offers, as all the cloud providers do in different formats, different classes, right? So in AWS, as an example, you have an S3 infrequent access, which is cheaper for things you less frequently access, very cleverly named. Then you also have Glacier, which is a cold storage for things that you rarely access over time. So before you start deleting things, see if you can start paying less for that which you are using. Once you've done those two, then let's look at right sizing. Let's see where we can maybe switch to a different class or size. Right sizing is one of the trickiest things in optimization in the FinOps world. We had one of our charter members on an early FinOps Foundation call, say that engineering teams often can be very emotional about the resources they have chosen, and they have very strong reasons, and often very much based in data as well, but a lot of connection to why they did those things. So this is something that is going to take time. Right sizing will take you months or years, and it's not an overnight exercise. Even if you go do it all right now and you think you've got it all done, it's a whack-a-mole game that over time pops up. So you've got to get the communications, the systems, the processes in place to really nail this over time. AWS offers things like savings plans. Azure offers RIs. Again, GCP offers committed use discounts. this is the thing you should be doing right now. Go buy some of these if you haven't. It's very unlikely that you couldn't benefit from buying more if you already have. Fast win with the flexibility that savings plans offer now to apply to all compute. RIs and Azure also have a lot of flexibility, as do GCP. These are things you can take action on immediately. Don't wait till you right size. Again, that will take months. Don't wait till you shut down resources. If you have 20% of your infrastructure covered, or even 50% under savings plans or RIs, and you say, well, I don't want to buy more until I optimize these other things, are you really planning to shut down the other half, right? Can you get up to 60% or 70% and then right size and optimize in parallel? These are things I highly recommend you go do now. Quickest win hit. Yes, it is a year commitment, but the break-even points on these things often are 2, 3, 5 months at most. And every month you sit there waiting to right size, waiting to shut down things with the teams, you're paying more than you need to be. Last, also a hot topic, obviously, is considering containerization for existing workloads or serverless for new ones. Everybody likes to talk about these two. Frankly, it's only the most advanced and mature companies out there that I've seen have success with them. I would say containerization is not the magic bullet that many people want it to be from a cost perspective, but if done right over time, you really can get better bin packing so you can use the resources better. So it is a long-term approach, but you want to move in that direction. From having lots and lots of conversations, literally hundreds over the years with companies looking at serverless, would also recommend you not try and refactor in the short term your existing workloads into serverless, as most companies don't have the internal skill sets to do that. Potentially look at it for new ones. It is a lot cheaper, but there's an opportunity cost of potentially getting that education skill up as well, but important long-term place to do. So with that, and I know I'm short on time, we'll do the quick plug if you want to get into the conversation. And for some reason, the slides are not advancing. So Joe, if you don't mind clicking that forward. The FinOps Foundation brings together about 1,300 experts now. It was 26 when we started a year ago, from all sorts of companies around the world, many of them over $1 billion in revenue, who come together to share best practices and inspiration and stories. A lot of those have been collected into the book we mentioned, the Cloud FinOps book, that O'Reilly published to begin of this year. And then there's also a FinOps certified practitioner, which is a one-day course to really get introduced into the basics of how to deploy this in your organization. So welcome you, invite you to join that conversation as part of the FinOps Foundation. And we'll pass back to you, Joe, as I know we're a little over time here.
Thank you very much, JR. Really appreciate that. As another plug for the FinOps Foundation and certification, I actually took that class in person. I think it is available online, but it's really helpful, not only learning from the FinOps folks, but also actually getting to sit with different people in different roles at companies. There's a lot of collaboration, and that certification has definitely come in handy for us. So just real quick, one of the things that we do at Edrans, like we said, we do these smaller assessment type services. We do have a cost optimization assessment that we just kind of started running recently, where we do a quick plug-in to your infrastructure, and we give basically recommendations that are ranked by estimated complexity versus how big the financial impact is. And we give a roadmap on exactly how to fix those up that you can take as a company, or we can just do it for you. So just to go through this real quick, we've got a couple questions. And so JR, if you're still on, I will just, I'm gonna ask a couple of them and then we can cut it off here. So one of the first questions is an AWS specific question is, which should I optimize first, savings plans or go try to shut down resources?
Yeah, I did touch on that a bit though, but I would say it's really both, which is you want to start the individual teams with starting to look at right sizing, with starting to look at how do we make those changes, but it is a muscle that they will need to develop over time and start to do, I like to think of it as small, non-controversial buys of savings plans, reserved instances, et cetera, in parallel. That is also a muscle that your finance teams, procurement teams, business teams need to start to understand. How to account for them, how to align them. I would say that as much as you can detach those two from being dependent on each other, the better, because typically the tech teams are not great about thinking about financial commitments and the terms of things like savings plans, there's constantly a conversation of, oh, we're going to refactor, we're going to shut these things down, but that takes time. And the finance teams are not very good at understanding which infrastructure can be shut down. So if you can separate those two, it's a right size while we start this process, and also by savings plans, you're going to be in the best spot. It's not an either or, it's both.
Awesome, thanks. Final question is sort of looks like a sort of almost summary type of question is, how long does it take for companies to consider themselves cost optimized?
Yeah, that's often a question of, okay, we start this process now, where do we end up with it? And the answer is, unfortunately, you're never really there, right? It's you never hit prime optimization. It's really want to be measured more in how well have we set up processes to enable teams to do that. That being said, maybe something more easily quantifiable is how quickly can you move through the phases of the FinOps lifecycle, which is inform, optimize, operate, et cetera. For a smaller company, you can probably do your first iterations right in weeks or months. For a much larger company, Fortune 500 style, it can take months to sort of move through each phase and get agreement on allocation and get agreement on what to optimize and get security sign-offs and all those things. I'd stress that you never want to boil the ocean in attacking this process. You don't want to say, well, I'm not going to do any optimization until I've fully allocated everything. I'm not going to put any automation in place until we have complete goals and KPIs. Look for those small iterative steps where you can move quickly through the process. Everybody's going to be learning and upscaling, and the cloud providers are constantly changing the offerings, not only in terms of products, but how you can optimize them. So, look to enable teams and move as quickly as your organization is able to.
Awesome. Thanks very much, JR. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll cut it off now. We've got some other questions that we'll answer in all of them in a follow-up, and we'll have this available probably on YouTube in about a day. That we'll send out a link to everyone that joined. So feel free to reach out, talk about anything about cost optimization or FinOps, and we'll get you in touch with the right people. So thank you and have a great day.